In part two, we're going to be talking about organizing your persuasive speech. Sir J. Arthur Thompson says the most powerful factors in the world are clear ideas in the minds of energetic men of goodwill. And I like to think that when he says men, he means all mankind. It includes me too. So let's go on and talk about, now that you've got an idea about your persuasive topic and your persuasive speech, how we're going to organize it to best affect the audience that we have in mind. There are three types of persuasive speeches. Okay, so persuasive speeches answer one of three types of questions. They revolve around propositions and respond to one of these three types of questions. You don't want to answer more than one, just one. Stick with one. Be clear about what you're trying to persuade your audience to do or think. Questions of fact, questions of value, questions of policy. So let's break these down a bit more into the different types. A persuasive speech that deals with the question of fact is a question about the truth or falsity of an assertion, okay? You're trying to prove something is true or false. So it's usually organized topically. For example, to persuade my audience that William Shakespeare did not write the plays attributed to him. You're trying to prove that this statement is true. It's a true or false. It's a question of fact, okay? Your main points might be that biographical and textual evidence suggests that they did not write plays, or he did not write the plays, and then historical evidence suggests someone else wrote the plays. Okay, so this is in topical order. Doesn't have to be, but usually organized in topical order. That's questions of fact. The second is questions of value. A question of value deals with the worth, rightness, morality of an idea or action, usually, again, organized topically. So if we're talking true or false, it's a question of fact. If we're talking right or wrong, it's a question of value. For example, to persuade my audience that elephant trophy hunting is legally and morally wrong. Anytime you see morals or ethics or right and wrong, we're talking a question of value. Okay, it's a question of value. Elephant trophy hunting violates international accords and violates what moral philosophers say is our duty to treat animals humanely. So we have questions of fact, questions of value, and questions of policy. Question of policy is the speech you're going to be giving in your persuasive speech for our course. It's a question about whether a course of action should or should not be taken. It's a question of policy. Here's a key here. Anytime you hear something about changing a law or repealing a law or changing a policy, it literally is a question of policy. So there are two goals for a question of policy. One, you can just ask for passive agreement. I want you to agree with me that this should change, right? Or you can inspire people to take action. And there are multiple organizational patterns you can use to consider either passive agreement or inspiring to take action. So let's look at these. Three basic issues to consider are need, plan, and practicality. So is there a need for change? Do you, the speaker, have a plan to solve the problem with a plan? You know, for that need to change? And then what's the practicality? Will the plan solve the problem? Questions of policies arise almost every day in our lives. Anytime you see a sales pitch, it's a question of policy, trying to get you to take action on purchasing the product. Anytime that you have our vote on something, it's a question of policy. So it comes up quite often, which is the reason why in our course, question of policy is the required question for your persuasive speech. It must be a question of policy. Okay, ready for a quick quiz? Are these a question of fact, value, or policy? Here's an example. I'm going to use the one topic to show you how it changes based on question of fact, value, or policy. Here's the first one. To persuade my audience that the free school meals program improves school culture and performance. Is that a question of fact, value, or policy? If you said question of fact, you are correct. You're trying to prove that this is true, that there's a correlation between school improvement and free school meals. Okay, with the same topic, let's look at it a little different way. To persuade my audience that providing free school meals to all students is the right thing to do. Is that a question of fact, value, or policy? Well, if you're listening about my key words, it's the right thing to do. It's morally right. It's morally correct. You would know this is a question of value. Third, same topic. To persuade my audience to support the free school meals program in their schools, in their local schools. This is a question of fact, value, or policy. If you said policy, you are correct. Is it a passive agreement or take action? might be a little hard to tell, because it does say support the free school bills program. But I will say that it doesn't specifically ask your audience to do anything, so it is passive agreement. If you were to say, and here's the fourth example, to persuade my audience to contact their state legislator and voice their support for the free school meals program, now we're talking about taking inspiring action. You want your audience to go do something about it. So I chose the same topic here because I want you to see that depending on how you word your question, it becomes a question of fact, value, or policy. You do not want to try to do a two-pronged approach with your audience. You want to stick with one idea. Be very clear on what you're persuading them to do. So if you were looking at question one here, question of fact, persuading my audience that the free school meals program improves school culture performance, what kind of research are you looking for? You're probably looking for data. You're looking for research. You're looking for studies that have been done on, do hungry kids perform poorly, or do kids who are well fed at school perform better? Does it change the school culture? Have there been examples, right? If you're looking at providing school meals is the right thing to do, now you're talking about taking care of our neighbor. You might be bringing in religious or ethical arguments. You're looking at a different kind of research, a different kind of resource for a question of value. When you start talking about supporting free school programs, free school meal programs, now we're talking about getting your audience to agree that it's a good idea, and you might use information about improvement or it's the right thing to do in having them support it. And the last example, when you really want them to go take action about it, now not only are you using all those other examples, but now you want to say, now I need you to go do something about it, right? And you're prompting them to take action. So I wanted you to see how one topic could be broken down into fact, value, or policy, and how the research you're going to be doing and the sources you want to use will be different depending on that question. We are doing a question of policy. Your speech must be on a question of policy because that's the one you're going to most often have to present. So as you're looking for that question of policy, wording your question as specific as possible is going to help you in finding the right research for persuading your audience. Okay, let's move on. To organize your speech on a question of policy, we talked about topical for questions of fact and value. Question of policy has a couple different ways we can present our ideas. One is problem solution order, problem cause solution order, comparative advantages, and then Monroe's motivated sequence. Let's break these down. In the problem solution organizational pattern, you're going to first deal with main points with the extension with the existence of a problem, and the second main point presents the solution. So you may only have two main points. They look something like this. To persuade my audience, the U.S. Congress should pass legislation that will reduce lead levels in the nation's water supply. Lead levels are a problem. There's your main point number one. And number two, solving the problem requires action by the federal government. So problem, solution. If you want to go a step further, you can go problem, cause, solution. So not just here's a problem, here's a solution, but here's a problem, here's the cause of it. We should fix this. Here's the solution. The first main point identifies a problem. Second main point analyzes the cause. Third main point presents a solution to the problem. May look something like this. To persuade my audience that action is required to deal with the problem of childhood obesity. It is a major problem in the United States. There are two major causes, and we need to deal with it with both causes. It's a simplified example, but you get the idea. If you have two plans you want to compare, you might use comparative advantages. It's an organizational pattern in which each main point explains why a speaker's solution is preferable to other proposed solutions. So anytime you have two plans and you're going to go, here's why this plan is better over this plan, then it's comparative advantages. To persuade my audience that our city should build a rapid bus system instead of a new highway. Research models show that we'll save $1 million on a rapid bus and will reduce traffic congestion that a new highway would not. So you're comparing two plans, bus system, new highway. So we've got problem solution, problem cause solution, comparative advantages, and the last one is called Monroe's motivated sequence. It's an organizational pattern that seeks to inspire action in the audience. So this is not for passive agreement. This one is for inspiring action. Excuse me. There are 5 parts. It was created by Alan Monroe, a professor at Purdue University in the 1930s, and he came up with this 5-step sequence that is really good at persuading your audience to take action. It's used a lot in advertising. So now once you hear it, you may go, oh, I see that now in advertising. Whether it's print, audio, video, doesn't matter. It's used a lot. There are 5 steps. First, gain attention. As always, you must gain attention with all of your speeches at the very beginning. Grab your audience's attention somehow. This is an extended sort of attention grab. So you're going to have a larger part for Monroe's motivated sequence. Then explain the need. Here's the need. Here's the problem. Here's what we need to solve. Then you're going to show how your plan satisfies that need. Here's what we're going to do to help fix that problem. Help your audience visualize or imagine future, how this plan is going to work. And at the end, call to action. So you inspire them to take action. So in the beginning, you've got the hook or the punch, the attention getter. It's more than just a sentence. It's extended out a bit. So it's the attention, the entire introduction, getting the hook, and leading them in to talk about the problem. I've got your attention. Let me tell you what's wrong. So it kind of dips down a bit. Here's the problem. Here's the need. Here's the cause for a solution. But then you're going to come back with, but wait, I have a solution. It's the satisfaction. Here's the solution, and it's going to fix the need. It's going to solve the problem, whatever it is. And then imagine when this works. This is the visualization. Imagine how this is going to work, and imagine what it's going to be like in the future when you've taken the plan and applied it to the need, and we've solved this problem. This is how it's going to be great. And this is where we're going to use ethos, pathos, logos, which we'll be talking about in part 3, and how you're going to have success in persuading your audience to the end, which is then to call them to action. You're going to recap all you've told them, call them to take action, whatever it is, whether it's to buy your product, to donate to your charity, to try a new sport, to whatever it is you're trying to persuade them of. Eat more blueberries, which was a very persuasive speech I saw from a student once. Why? To persuade their audience to eat more blueberries. It was great. Whatever it is, to take action on the next step. Okay, so this is Monroe's motivated sequence. And it's one that you're going to use quite a lot. It's great for short speeches. It's great for longer speeches. And anytime you want to call someone to take action, you're trying to persuade people to take action on something. This is a great sequence to use in your policy speech. So to summarize part 2, we talked about types of persuasive speeches with questions of fact, value, and policy. We talked about organizational patterns for questions of policy with problem solution, problem cause solution, and comparative advantages, as well as Monroe's motivated sequence. Up next in part 3, we're going to talk about methods of persuasion. So stick around.